Namaskar, this is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. 6 days and counting, the California wildfires continue to burn. The devastation is immense. Thousands of homes gutted, people displaced, even dead. As authorities try to tame the flames, politicians are fighting over who is to blame and fueling the debate on how it all began. Who or what started the fires? Was it deliberate? An act of arson? We'll discuss. Halfway across the world, Bangladesh is spoiling for a fight. They're now targeting India over a border fence. We will bring you the full story. Also looking at the economy, why is the rupee falling and the Indian markets crashing? Is Sweden at war? The Prime Minister does not say no. Why the Venezuelan president has threatened to liberate Puerto Rico from the US with the help of Brazilian forces. Why Thailand wants to legalize gambling and casinos. Why Algeria and France are fighting over influencers. What is the story of the Kumbh tax? And why did Jeff Bezos' dream rocket fail to take off? All this and more coming up. The headlines first. A 6.8 magnitude earthquake strikes southwestern Japan, triggering 2 small tsunamis in the area, but no damage was reported. Japan is one of the most tectonically active countries. The archipelago accounts for around 18% of the world's earthquakes. Russia and Iran sign a comprehensive strategic partnership treaty. The deal will be sealed on Friday when the Iranian president visits Russia. In recent months, Moscow and Tehran have boosted their military and political cooperation. Last year, Vladimir Putin signed a similar treaty with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. In India, Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurates the Z-Mode tunnel in Jammu and Kashmir. The strategic state-of-the-art tunnel is in the Gandarbal district. The tunnel makes the tourist hotspot of Sonmarg a year-round destination. Jammu and Kashmir held its election in September last year. This was Prime Minister Modi's first visit there since then. Germany races to contain a foot-and-mouth disease outbreak. The virus is threatening to hit the country's agricultural exports. South Korea and Mexico have told Berlin that they would halt pork imports. This is the first reported incidence of the virus in Germany since 1988. And South Korea's impeached and suspended president is set to get a pay rise. Yoon Suk-yeol's salary will see a hike of 3%. This is despite a trial and investigation into his martial law declaration in December. Yoon continues to evade arrest by remaining holed up in the presidential residence. The fires are still burning. It has now been 6 days. California is ablaze. It is the site of the deadliest wildfire in American history. California is one of the biggest and politically most influential states in the United States. Los Angeles is the epicenter of this crisis. LA is better known as the home of Hollywood. It is a county in California, and it is the worst hit by the wildfire. At least 24 people have died in LA. The fire has swallowed up to 12,000 buildings. Many more are still in its path. The scale of the disaster is enormous. Thousands of people have lost their homes. Take a look at this video. It shows one of the affected families. When they returned home, they found it completely torched.
Oh my god.
We left it on the sidewalk. I threw it out.
What is it? It's a wine case.
It's a case for wine. But it's the only thing we have left.
I feel broken. I feel lost. I feel devastated. I don't want to have to tell my boys that this was their home and it's gone.
The fires have burnt more than 40,000 acres of land. Some 150,000 people have been forced to evacuate. Many celebrities like Paris Hilton and Mel Gibson have lost their homes. Evidently, the fire is not sparing the rich and famous. It is engulfing their expensive property, making it the costliest blaze in US history. The overall losses have surpassed $250 billion. For the victims, this may only be the beginning of their ordeal. Like I said, thousands of homes have been destroyed. That loss alone of homes could touch $20 billion. Obviously, homeowners are anxious. They're not sure if insurance would cover this disaster. It is a full-blown crisis, one that the world is watching closely. The US is the richest, arguably best-equipped country in the world, yet it is not being able to contain a wildfire. World leaders are offering help, and this list is quite interesting. Mexico and Canada, two countries with which incoming President Trump has picked a fight, are sending firefighting teams. Even Ukraine's President Zelensky has made an offer. Listen to this.
The situation there is extremely challenging, and Ukrainians can help Americans protect lives. We already have 150 firefighters prepared.
There are already 14,000 firefighters on the ground. They are being assisted by 84 aircraft and more than 1,300 fire engines. These numbers are significant. But even these resources are proving to be inadequate, not enough to contain, let alone douse the fire. The fear is it could take weeks to do that, to bring the situation under control. Take a look at this video. It was shot from a plane supporting the firefighting efforts on the ground. Just look at the scale of the crisis. How did things get out of hand? Was it just the weather? Or has California been failed by its leaders? As the blaze continues, a political firestorm has also erupted. The Republicans are targeting the Democrats. They're taking aim at Gavin Newsom. He is the governor of California, a Democrat and a future presidential hopeful. A lot of political observers believe that Gavin Newsom is hoping to run for president in the next election cycle, that's 2028. But this crisis could derail his plans. President-elect Donald Trump is attacking him, and I must add here that Trump has had a long-standing feud with Gavin Newsom. So he's not going to pass up the opportunity to attack Newsom. Trump is targeting his team. He says, and I'm quoting, "Incompetent officials are managing the crisis." In response, Newsom has invited Trump to visit California and see the ground situation for himself. Newsom is facing attacks from Elon Musk too, one of Trump's closest allies and the owner of social media platform X, which he has weaponized again. Musk has unleashed a flood of posts on the wildfire. One of them claimed that the Democrats have, and I'm quoting, "the Democrats have decriminalized looting." We told you about this last week. Looters are taking advantage of the situation. They're ransacking abandoned homes. Newsom himself responded to Elon Musk's post. He said all looters will be arrested and prosecuted. More than 20 people have been arrested so far, but there's still lawlessness, and Musk has been relentless. He says bad governance and not climate change is to blame for this fire. Now, to be fair, it's a bit of both. Climate change is a real and escalating threat. It has made the crisis worse, but the Democrats are not without blame. Bad governance, especially at the local level, is very much an issue. There are reports of fire hydrants running dry and water shortages.
The water issue is something happened there. I mean, there was no water, not enough water. You turn on the hydrants and there's drips and drops coming out. So they have to figure that out. How the heck did that happen? I mean, our dam system is falling apart. We just don't have the resources anymore. And, nobody wants to spend the money at the right time in the right place. And then by the time you look at it again, it's 5 times more expensive to do the thing.
To make matters worse, when the wildfires began, the mayor of LA was missing in action. Her name is Karen Bass. She was in Ghana with the presidential delegation. An investigation is now underway into the water shortages. The mayor says that she will look into the lapses. At this point, though, the first priority would be to bring the fire under control. The Los Angeles fires are devastating, the politics even worse. But how did it all start? Was it the ever-present scapegoat, climate change, or is there something darker at play here? Arson, perhaps. The first fire began in the Pacific Palisades at around 10:30 a.m. local time on January 7. 2 other fires broke out on the same day, Eaton and Hearst. All of these fires have not been contained yet. The Palisades is the worst one. Only 13% of it has been contained. The others 2 are burning. More fires broke out on January 8 in Woodley, in Lydia, and in the Hollywood Hills. All of these have been contained. Investigators are now looking into multiple causes. The first is the old fires. Around New Year's Day, a small blaze broke out near Palisades. It was caused by fireworks. The LA Fire Department contained it soon after, but winds could have reignited it. Old embers could have triggered a bigger fire. Detectives are looking into it. The second reason is climate change. You see, in America's West Coast, wildfires are a natural part of life. They play a crucial role, in fact. Los Angeles is located in Southern California. The region experienced drought for over 2 decades. This was followed by unusually heavy rainfall, and that too for 2 years. All of this led to explosive vegetative growth. This year was the city's driest winter, and that meant that the entire region was a tinderbox. All it took was one spark. It could be cars passing by, it could be a discarded cigarette, it could be lightning. Anything could cause this dry vegetation to catch fire. These fires are then fanned by extreme winds. They're called the Santa Ana. These winds move very fast. Take the Palisades fire, for example. It started in the morning. In just 25 minutes, it spread to over 200 acres, courtesy these dry winds. And they even lead to more fires. Which brings us to the third reason, downed power lines. Now, usually Los Angeles cuts power to houses when there are strong winds. But in Eaton, the houses had power even after the inferno sparked. So it is possible that a branch caught fire or the power lines fell, sparking a fire. Now, of course, all of this is speculation. Investigating a fire like this takes months, if not years. All the evidence is charred. There is very little to go off on. It's like a crime scene on a burner. But some on the internet are convinced that there is only one reason: arson. Look at these posts on X. They were posted by celebrities in LA. They believe that this was not the work of nature and that arsonists were behind this. Elon Musk, too, has waded into this debate. He did not say anything on X himself, but he reposted a video of a so-called immigrant with a blowtorch. And what are the officials saying? The LA Fire Department was asked about this. They have ruled out any arson activities so far. But experts say it is very much a possibility. Arsonists may not have started the fires, but they may have taken advantage of the situation and fanned the fires. They say it cannot be ruled out, the experts. Now, this debate is as hot as the fire itself. Here's another one, and it has left LA divided. This one is about wooden homes. They are a relic of the 20th century. Los Angeles faced frequent earthquakes, so houses were made of wood. That allowed them to keep standing. But many believe that it's time to move to relatively fireproof material like concrete. Look at this Malibu mansion. It is the only one left standing while all the houses around it are charred. The reason? Using fireproof material. So it's time LA rethinks its infrastructure. Will it learn from this devastation, or will history keep repeating itself with more lives and homes lost? For now, Los Angeles is still burning. The questions, the blame, and the lessons, they will all have to wait. Provocation at the border, top envoys summoned and tensions escalating. I know it sounds like India and China from 2020, but it's actually India and Bangladesh. The trouble began early on Sunday. Dhaka's interim Home Minister accused India of provocations. He said India was building fences at the border at around 5 different places. He also said that Bangladeshi forces intervened, that they stopped the Indian construction. Hours later, Dhaka summoned India's top diplomat in Bangladesh, High Commissioner Pranay Verma. He met the interim foreign minister in Dhaka. He reaffirmed India's commitment to a crime-free border. It tells you what India's focus is: to secure and sanitize the long border. But Bangladesh, they're more focused on politicizing it. Dhaka expressed deep concern over events at the border. They also asked India to stop the fencing work. Then today, New Delhi retaliated. They summoned Dhaka's Deputy High Commissioner in India. He was basically told 3 things. 1, that India's fencing observes all protocols. 2, that India is committed to a crime-free border. And 3, that India expects all previous understandings to be implemented. They're talking about agreements signed with Sheikh Hasina. Now, if you put all of this together, one thing is quite clear: tensions are rising to a dangerous point. So tonight, let's take a closer look at this border. What is the situation there? And what is the politics around it? The India-Bangladesh border is among the longest in the world. It is around 4,100 kilometers long. It is also very porous. India has long complained of illegal migration and smuggling, hence the bid to fence it up. Around 3,200 kilometers have already been fenced, but the rest remains vulnerable. On India's side, the border is managed by the BSF, the Border Security Force, BSF. On the Bangladeshi side, it is managed by the BGB, the Border Guard Bangladesh. There are 4 border treaties between Delhi and Dhaka. One of them has banned construction in the no man's land. Think of this as a buffer zone. It extends 137 meters on either side of the border. Some of the fences were inside that no man's land. So India had sought permission for the construction. Sheikh Hasina was Prime Minister back then, and her government okayed it. Basically, Bangladesh allowed India to erect those fences. But now there is a new regime in Dhaka, one that wants to undo everything that Sheikh Hasina did, hence the opposition to India's fence. But frankly, they're playing a dangerous game, because it's not just security personnel. People living near the border are also getting involved. Bangladeshi villagers are confronting India's BSF. They are disrupting the fencing work. And what is Dhaka doing? Praising them. Their Home Minister is thanking these villagers for taking on the BSF, the Indian forces. In response, Indian locals have also started amassing. Take a look at this video. It shows men with sticks and knives at the border. Needless to say, this is dangerous, but it also raises questions. Doesn't Dhaka trust its own border force? If it does, Why outsource security to random villagers? And why walk back on commitments? Yes, Sheikh Hasina has been ousted, but that does not nullify agreements made by her as Prime Minister. The thing is, Dhaka is spoiling for conflict. Their border guards report to the interim Home Minister. His name is Jahangir Alam Chaudhry. He actually headed the border force from 2001 to 2006, and he picked many fights with India. He once accused India of harboring anti-Bangladesh terrorists. He also blamed New Delhi for a grenade attack in 2005. So frankly, this flare-up is not surprising. It's probably what he was picked for. But the Home Minister should get his priorities right, maybe focus more on internal matters. For example, the attacks on minorities in Bangladesh. Bangladesh police have prepared a report on those attacks. They have recorded around 1,400 incidents. They also say that 98% of these were political. Only 1.6% were communal. Dhaka is trying to say that Hindus were not targeted for their religion, they were targeted for supporting Sheikh Hasina. Just one question though, how did they find this out? Did they read the minds of the attackers, or did they hypnotize them to reveal their true motives? This report is a laughable cover-up. It justifies violent attacks on Bangladesh's minorities. It passes off religious violence as political vendetta. It also shows Dhaka's reluctance to admit facts. Instead, they're busy poking India at the border. There is little hope from the interim regime, but Indian and Bangladeshi border forces do meet regularly to sort out differences. Let's hope that their professionalism upholds peace. Now let's talk about the Indian markets. They're clearly feeling the Monday blues. There was a massive crash today. Both the Sensex and the Nifty fell to a 7-month low. They dropped by over 1%. No relief for the Indian rupee either. It's recorded its biggest slide in 2 years. $1 is now worth almost 87 Indian rupees. For Indian investors, 2025 has started on a rough note. Recent weeks have been all about dips in the markets. The overall sentiment is bearish, but what is causing this weakness? It is a combination of both domestic and global factors. Let's start with what's happening at home. Last week, we received some news about the Indian economy. The government has downgraded its forecast, its growth forecast. India will grow at 6.4% this year. That's what they've said. That is the new projection for the current financial year, the one that ends in March 2025. 6.4% is the slowest pace of growth in 4 years. The earlier projection was between 6.5 and 7%. Now remember, 6.4% still makes India one of the fastest growing major economies in the world, but this dip is worrying nonetheless. The Indian economy is showing signs of weakness. In the second half of 2024, inflation was high, investment was sluggish, and India's trade gap grew wider. Trade gap is the difference between imports and exports. When this gap grows, it's a sign of sluggish growth. It shows that a country is importing more but exporting less. This is also called a trade deficit. A higher trade deficit can be a bad sign for the economy. Indian corporates too seem to be struggling. We're talking about India's listed companies, those which trade on these stock exchanges. At least 45 listed companies could see their profits drop by double digits. This is for the third quarter from October to December 2024. Indian companies are complaining about weak demand, meaning fewer customers are buying their products. As a result, foreign investors have pulled their money. So far, they have withdrawn around $2.5 billion from the Indian markets. This is just for January, and we're not even halfway through the month. So that's the challenge at home. The Indian economy is also facing challenges from overseas. The US economy is showing signs of strength. Last week, we got fresh jobs data. America's unemployment rate fell to 4.1%, which is the lowest in 11 months, and this has surprised investors.
We saw the labor market report from the U.S. on Friday. It was unexpectedly strong. The unemployment rate has fallen and more new jobs have been created than expected. After Friday's strong labor market report, most major U.S. banks now only expect the Fed to cut interest rates in May or June.
America's strong jobs data is bad news for Indian markets. It could make investors park their money in the US and invest less in emerging markets like India. The trend also puts the rupee under pressure. India's Reserve Bank, or RBI, has tried to defend the rupee. It has been dumping dollars and buying up the Indian currency to prop it up. The RBI has been using up its foreign exchange reserves for this. In the beginning of this month, the bank spent around $6 billion to defend the rupee, but the challenge persists. Although it's not all bad news, there are some positive trends as well. India's retail inflation declined in December to less than 6%. This is a 4-month low. Food prices have dipped by around 1%. They're hovering around 8% now, which is still high. Overall, India's inflation rate is still above 5%. The RBI's target is 4%. So they will have to work harder to tame it. The days ahead will be challenging, and the current trends will test the Indian economy further. Is Sweden at war? The country's prime minister is giving mixed signals. He says Stockholm may not be at war, but there is no peace either. What does that mean? Well, the reason for this statement are the hybrid attacks in the Baltic Sea. They've left Sweden spooked. This is a country that was known for its peaceful stance for more than 200 years, but it is facing a new reality now, with the war in Ukraine raging on and Russia's aggressive posture looming large. Is Sweden truly on the brink of war? Our next report tells you.
In 2022, war came to the borders of Europe. Russia invaded Ukraine. 1,054 days later, the conflict brews on. It left the Nordic nations spooked, given their close proximity to Russia. So, they opted to join the military alliance, NATO. Finland became a member in 2023. Sweden became one in 2024.
With that, Mr. Prime Minister, the floor is yours.
And it hoped that would be enough. After all, Sweden hasn't been militarily aligned for the last 200 years. So it was a tough choice, but a necessary one for the country. However, the country's prime minister has now issued an ominous statement.
Sweden is not at war, but there is not peace either. Real peace means freedom and no serious conflicts between countries. We and our neighboring countries are subjected to hybrid attacks that are not carried out with missiles and soldiers, but with computers, money, disinformation, and threats of sabotage.
Ulf Kristersson cites hybrid attacks, suspected sabotage in the Baltic Sea, and a proxy war fought on its soil. Sweden will also send 3 ships and aircraft to NATO's Baltic Patrol mission. This is to monitor critical infrastructure and combat Russia's shadow fleet in the Baltic Sea. It is not the first time that this has happened. Last year, in January, 2 top defense officials issued a warning. The first warning came from Carl Oskar Bolin, Sweden's top defense official. He said that Sweden must prepare for war. A new warning came just days later. It was from Sweden's military chief. He said all Swedes must be mentally prepared for it. The warning from the defense officials had left the country spooked. There was panic buying, frightened children, and a fierce debate over fear-mongering. Helplines in the country were overwhelmed. They had children calling and asking the same question. Will we be going to war soon? That's not all. In November, millions of Swedes received a pamphlet advising the population on how to prepare for war. Such an emergency booklet is not new. Sweden issued one during World War II. It was called If War Comes. This booklet was updated during the Cold War. And now the country has issued another version. Sweden has also restarted its compulsory civic duty. It's a form of national service. It was abandoned after the Cold War, but now it's back. Citizens will be trained in emergency services and electricity provision. Plus, the military policy has changed. Not everyone is required to join the army, but a small portion of the population will be called every year, around 100,000 of them. Does that mean Sweden is really going to war? Since the Ukraine war, the situation has been tense. But many believe it's just fear-mongering, both by the government and the army. The government has been accused of drumming up support. Meanwhile, the army, they have been accused of trying to raise their annual budget. So, is Sweden on the brink of war, or is this a nation trying to balance preparedness with peace in uncertain times? Of course, war is always a possibility, especially in a volatile region. But as the world watches, one thing remains certain. The peace Sweden has treasured for 200 years is being tested like never before.
Our next story is about Nicolas Maduro, the disputed president of Venezuela. Half the world rejects his presidency, the West mostly. They say he stole the election and therefore he isn't legitimate. Maduro does not really care about that though. He is happy to irritate the West. In fact, he just took it up a notch. Maduro has threatened to quote-unquote liberate Puerto Rico from American control with the help of Brazilian troops. That's a bold thing to say. Quite the way to kick off a new presidential term. Before coming to the threat, let's look at the build-up. Maduro was just sworn in on Friday for his third consecutive term, another 6-year term as president. And this act incensed the West, the US in particular. Washington responded with the usual slew of sanctions. They added 8 more Maduro supporters to the list, bringing it up to 187 individuals. 187 supporters of Nicolas Maduro sanctioned by America. They also targeted the man of the hour himself. The US has raised the bounty on Maduro to $25 million for his arrest or conviction. They first put a bounty on Maduro back in 2020 after American courts convicted him on charges of narco-terrorism, basically for excessive drug trafficking. The US claims that Maduro intentionally sends drugs to their country to destabilize it. The courts even referred to Maduro as a cartel member, and they put out a $15 million bounty for his arrest. Now that bounty has been increased to $25 million. But let's face it, it's not like the amount was a problem there. The problem is, how do you arrest someone with an army?
The Bolivarian National Armed Forces expressed their most vigorous and categorical rejection of the new sanctions imposed by the infamous Imperial Brotherhood. Today, the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the U.S. Department of the Treasury, along with the European Union and the United Kingdom, attacked Venezuelan state officials, including our commander-in-chief.
The Venezuelan army seems firmly behind Maduro. They even took a dig at Western countries, calling them an Imperial Brotherhood. Now, this is a well-known line of attack. Maduro and his followers claim that the West is determined to colonize the rest of the world and they hate him because he resists. Now, to his credit, the colonization argument is a good one. The US just imposed more sanctions on Venezuela, but guess what they did not sanction this time around? Venezuelan oil.
Why was this administration hesitant to apply further sanctions to the oil and gas industry there?
That's still being investigated in terms of what impact it would have and whether or not it would just be replaced by Iran or any other country. So it matters what would happen afterwards. I had a long discussion again with the man who should be appointed president on that score, but since I didn't have a clear answer to what that would be, if I had more time, I may very well do that, but I didn't have enough data to make that judgment.
Biden did not sanction Venezuelan oil. He has passed the buck to Donald Trump, the incoming president. It is not a great look, and it gives weight to Maduro's claims of imperialism. So the Venezuelan decided to double down. Yesterday, he was at the International Anti-Fascist World Festival. It is being held in his own country, with delegates from 125 countries, some 2,000 people in all. Maduro took to the stage and played to the crowd. This is what he said: "The freedom of Puerto Rico is pending, and we will achieve it with the forces of Brazil." Interestingly, Brazil has not said a word about this. Maduro was basically pandering to his audience. He spoke about a famous Brazilian general who helped Simón Bolívar liberate Colombia and Venezuela. So the Brazil bit was just to hype up the crowd. But it was an interesting threat nonetheless. Maduro said that the liberation of Puerto Rico is pending. Puerto Rico is a US territory, as you would know, not a state, but an unincorporated territory. Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States of America. They have been since 1917 for more than 100 years, but they are second-class citizens. They cannot vote in the US presidential elections. Puerto Rico does not have proper representation in the US Congress. just a token observer with no voting powers. As a fig leaf, some people on the island do not pay federal income tax. Some people, not all. And that's just income tax. All Puerto Ricans pay other taxes and custom duties, and they are subject to laws passed by the US. So effectively, Puerto Rico is a modern-day American colony. The US says that this is what Puerto Ricans want. The island has held multiple referendums, and Washington says they chose to maintain the status quo. But that's not entirely accurate. Puerto Rico rejected US statehood up until the late 1990s, but it has held more plebiscites since, and a majority of the people have voted for full US statehood. In 2020, it was a clear-cut 52%. Last year, it was even higher at 56%. It is evident that younger generations want Puerto Rico to become a full state, but somehow Washington has always found excuses to avoid this, to keep the island in some semi-autonomous limbo. It is textbook colonialism. Maduro is correct about that. But his threat to invade, to liberate Puerto Rico is hollow. He's not sending his army anywhere. It is too much risk at a time when there's still a lot of resistance to his presidency at home. And to be clear, the US would decimate the Venezuelan forces if they entered Puerto Rico. But even though Maduro was probably joking, he raised an important point. How long will Puerto Rico stay in limbo? How long until they are granted true equality? Until the US rectifies this international embarrassment, opponents of the West will always be able to highlight the hypocrisy. Now let's turn our attention to Southeast Asia, where Thailand is betting big on gambling. They have approved a bill to legalize casinos. This is a controversial move for the Buddhist majority country. It is facing pushback, and it is yet to be voted on in the parliament. But if the bill passes, casinos will be legalized in the kingdom, and Thailand will join a number of nations who are trying to legalize gambling. So what's behind this growing trend? Why does Thailand want to make the gamble, and will it pay off? Here is a report.
In Buddhist majority Thailand, gambling gets a bad rep. Barring some forms, such as betting on boxing and horse racing, gambling has been banned since 1936. Yet, the Thais love to gamble. 60% of them do it regularly. So, big money is changing hands, but the government is losing out on it. The Southeast Asian country wants to change this, so Thailand is betting on gambling. They have approved a controversial bill to legalize casinos. The bill is yet to be voted on in the parliament, but if casinos are legalized, the kingdom would see gambling take place in entertainment centers. These are large-scale complexes which house other businesses like hotels, convention halls, theme parks and malls. That's where the casinos will also be set up. They will be open to those older than 20 years of age. Foreigners will be able to access them for free, but Thai citizens will have to pay $148.
The thrust of the law will require the setting up of a committee for entertainment complexes, the setting up of a regulator's office for entertainment complexes, and the setting up of clear guidelines on how to operate entertainment complexes. The purpose is to boost tourism and boost investment in the country and solve current problems related to illegal gambling.
What's behind this pivot? You see, Thailand is Southeast Asia's second largest economy, but it's ailing. It's falling far behind its peers like the Philippines, Vietnam and Indonesia. Household debt has reached nearly 87% of the GDP, which is among the highest in the world. The pandemic hammered the crucial tourism industry, which is the main drive of the Thai economy. Thailand has tried to boost tourism by luring more visitors, by cutting visa requirements for Chinese and Indian travelers. These measures have barely made a dent. So now, Thailand is going for broke.
The purpose is to boost tourism and boost investment in the country and solve current problems related to illegal gambling.
legalizing casinos will be like killing 3 birds with one poker chip. It's expected to boost the Thai economy, to create up to 15,000 new jobs, and increase tourist numbers by up to 10% to reach 40 million this year. By making this gamble, Thailand could hit a tourism record and join its neighbors Cambodia, Singapore, the Philippines, Laos and Myanmar to benefit from large casino complexes and become part of the growing trend. Gambling is a booming global market. It stands at $774 billion. It's legal in many countries, including the US, the UK, Australia and Brazil. France, Japan and the UAE are also moving towards legalizing it. But it's not enough to legalize gambling. Countries have to regulate it as well. For instance, in India, gambling has complex laws which differ across states. Most of them prohibit gambling. In Australia, which wagers more per capita than any other country, the government is trying to put a cap on gambling advertising. Meanwhile, the UK has restricted the amount of money people can place on slots. The examples are few and far between, and regulation has many holes. The world over, on average, gamblers generate 60% losses, and 450 million people have been harmed by gambling. This includes increased risk of financial ruin, family breakdown, suicide, domestic violence, and loss of employment. So, while successive Thai governments have sought to legalize gambling, they have faced pushback and criticism. But will this time be any different? Can gambling be Thailand's ace in the hole? All bets are off.
A diplomatic row is brewing between France and another African nation, another former French colony. This time the fight is with Algeria. France is having a meltdown because Algeria is not toeing the line.
I would like to express my surprise, and I think that we have reached an extremely worrying threshold with Algeria. It is clear that Algeria is seeking to humiliate France.
That was the French Interior Minister talking about the recent row that has erupted. It has been dubbed the influencer row or the blogger scandal. France arrested multiple Algerian influencers over the last few weeks. Last Thursday, tried to deport one of them, a 59-year-old blogger who goes by the handle Duolem. Now, the blogger was arrested in Montpellier last Tuesday for posting an inflammatory video. He called for violence against an anti-Algerian government activist. So France arrested him and then put him on a plane to Algeria on Thursday. But when he arrived, Algerian authorities promptly sent him back. They just rejected the deportation. Algeria says it is because they were not notified. They also said that the blogger should defend himself in France. But France does not believe that argument. Paris feels this was an insult.
France cannot tolerate this situation. And I think that, while keeping our cool, but our determination to defend our interests, we must now assess all the means available to us. And I mean all the means available to us with regard to Algeria.
Paris is reportedly planning a drastic retaliation. It is planning to scrap a travel agreement. This deal allowed Algerian diplomats to visit France without a visa. France says scrapping it would be, and I'm quoting, the smartest, most effective and quickest thing to do. If it happens, it would mark a new low, another milestone in the ongoing spat between the two nations. Like most African troubles, France brought this upon itself. It may sound harsh, but take a look for yourself. France and Algeria have always had tense relations. Algeria won its freedom in 1962 after a 7-year war of independence. Algerian accounts say more than 1 million people died. French numbers are more conservative, of course, no surprise there. Anyway, post-colonial ties were tense, but Algeria expected France to stick up for it on the international stage. It was the least that Paris could do, and it did for a while. But last year, President Emmanuel Macron abandoned Algeria. He chose to side with Morocco in a territorial dispute over the Western Sahara region. This infuriated Algeria. The country recalled its ambassador from France, and things have been going downhill since. In November, Algeria arrested a writer, a French-Algerian dual national. He was arrested for making controversial statements about Algeria's territory. Now, this man is 75 years old. He's currently in hospital. Paris has been trying to secure his release. This is a delicate situation, requiring subtlety and tact. Instead, France has Macron.
I have a special thought for a freedom fighter, writer and Franco-Algerian, Boualem Sansal. He is being held totally arbitrarily by the Algerian authorities. Algeria, which we love so much and with which we share so many children and so many stories, has become involved in a dishonorable affair by preventing a seriously ill man from receiving treatment. And this is not worthy of what she is. And we who love the Algerian people and their history urge their government to release Boualem Sansal.
Last week, Macron said Algeria was dishonoring itself for arresting the old writer, and Macron chose to say this in the most patronizing way possible. As you can imagine, Algiers was not happy. They lashed out, calling it unacceptable and blatant interference. Algeria hit back last Tuesday, the same day that the Algerian blogger was arrested. Quite the coincidence. By the looks of it, France is lashing out, deporting Algerian pro-government bloggers to make a point. So far, 4 have been arrested for violent rhetoric, and that is fair. They all said violent things, tantamount to hate speech. But why can't France sentence them at home? Why make a show of deporting them? It seems like Paris was trying to make a power move, but the move backfired. This is just the latest example of Macron's failing Africa policy. The Kumbh Mela is officially underway in Prayag Raj. I'm sure you've seen the headlines, the largest gathering of humanity, 600 million people to attend, and the first Mahakumbh in 144 years. It is a high-tech festival this time. You've got underwater drones, AI cameras and aerial surveillance. But decades ago, the Kumbh was very different. At one point, it was a revenue source for the British, a hub of nationalism, and a base for revolution. Tonight, we're telling you that story. Let's go back to the 1800s. That's when the British East India Company took control of Prayag Raj. In the middle of that century, they began noticing something about this city, a fair or mela every 12 years. Of course, the British did not care about the religious significance. They cared about the business opportunity, about making money. Every devotee at the Kumbh had to pay taxes to the company. How much? 1 rupee per person. That was the tax, the Kumbh tax, 1 rupee per person. You had to pay that tax to take a holy dip. I know that sounds like a lot right now, but remember, this is the 1800s. The average Indian salary was not even in double digits. A tailor would make around 8 rupees per month. A waiter or a sweeper would make around 4 rupees. Yet the Kumbh tax was 1 rupee. Why? Good old British exploitation. And all of this was documented by a British woman. Her name was Fanny Park. She lived in India for nearly 24 years, mostly around the city of Prayag Raj. And she has mentioned all of this in her memoir. How ordinary pilgrims were taxed by the company. Tax was also collected from businesses at the Kumbh, especially barbers. You see, most devotees would shave their heads in Prayag Raj, so barbers had a booming business. In 1870, the British set up 3,000 barber enclosures. They collected around 42,000 rupees from that Kumbh. Nearly 1/4 of it came from taxes on barbers. Every barber had to pay 4 rupees. Same story. In the 1882 Kumbh, the British collected nearly 50,000 rupees. Almost 10,000 of that came from barbers. It tells you how the British saw the Kumbh. They were initially frightened by the size of the gathering, by the political and religious patronage. But gradually, they started profiting from it. And this hurt the local community. Prayag Raj is home to the Prayagwal Brahmins. They would guide and help pilgrims who came for the Kumbh. They would also get paid for it. But the Kumbh tax cut into their revenue. Plus, they were unhappy with Christian missionaries. Many of them would camp in Prayag Raj. They would try to convert the thousands of Hindu pilgrims who came for the Kumbh. So naturally, the locals were unhappy. All this resentment was building throughout the 1800s. It exploded in 1857 during the First War of Independence. The First War of Indian Independence. The Prayag Wal supported this revolution. They couldn't fight themselves, but they aided the revolutionaries, like Rani Lakshmi Bai of Jhansi. She stayed with the Prayag Wals as the battle plans were charted. Thus began the Kumbh's link to Indian nationalism. It continued in the 20th century as well. Mahatma Gandhi attended the Kumbh Mela in 1918. He also took a dip in the Ganga. The British were clearly worried about this visit because they tracked him through intelligence reports. Another example is the 1942 Kumbh. It was happening during the Second World War, so the British restricted pilgrimage. Apparently, they were concerned about a Japanese attack, but some historians do not buy this version. They point to another possible reason, the Quit India movement. It was gaining traction around the same time, so historians say maybe the British wanted to avoid such a big gathering. It is among the many stories linked to the Kumbh, stories that cover India's history. In many ways, it is also a reflection of it. Taxed by the East India Company, exploited by the British Raj, celebrated by nationalists, and now the symbol of a new India, a country that blends customs with progress, rituals with technology, and religion with tourism. Like I said, the Kumbh is a lot more than just a gathering. There is a new rocket. It is called New Glenn, and it has never flown before. So this morning, it waited on a launch pad in Florida. The countdown clock started, but it was reset. Then it was reset again and again. 2 hours and 9 minutes later, the launch was called off. Now, New Glenn will have to wait a little longer, and so will Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, who also owns a space company called Blue Origin, and this rocket we just spoke about belongs to Blue Origin. It has been competing with Elon Musk's SpaceX for years, but Blue Origin has not been able to match its rival, which dominates the space market. Today, Bezos wanted to change that. So why did he fail? What does New Glenn aim to achieve? And can Blue Origin give SpaceX a run for its money? Here is a report.
This morning, a rocket as tall as a 32-story building sat on a launch pad in Florida. Loaded with propellants, it was ready for takeoff, hoping to head to space for the first time. But it wasn't to be. This is New Glenn. It's built by Blue Origin, the rocket company that Amazon's Jeff Bezos founded a quarter-century ago. Today was their D-Day, their inaugural high-risk, high-stakes mission. Their new rocket's debut launch. But just 6 minutes before it was set to blast into space, the launch was called off. Why? Over a few anomalies.
Okay, we've just been getting an update from Mission Control. We are standing down today's launch attempt to troubleshoot a vehicle subsystem issue that will take us beyond our launch window. We are reviewing opportunities for our next launch attempt.
Blue Origin has not shared many details about the issue or how long they plan to examine the snag for, or even when the next launch attempt would be. But one thing is clear, it's a setback for Blue Origin. Since he was a child, Bezos has been a fan of science fiction. He's talked about moving humanity to space. He has channeled billions of dollars to turn his dreams into reality. But since Blue Origin was founded in 2000, its accomplishments have been modest. The company has launched to space before, but not to orbit. And its successes have long lagged behind Elon Musk's SpaceX. This is the main reason why Bezos stepped down as Amazon chief in 2021. He wanted to focus on Blue Origin and especially New Glenn. The rocket has been in development for a decade, but Bezos sped up its operations and set an ambitious goal. After it's launched, New Glenn aims to land on a seafaring barge. Its first stage booster plans to land on a platform in the Atlantic, which is a maneuver mastered by Musk's Starship last year. The rocket's second stage booster will continue towards orbit. So today's launch was supposed to be a big moment for Blue Origin. It was supposed to give Bezos the chance to match his rival. It was supposed to inject competition into the rocket business. Because so far, SpaceX is dominating the market. They are launching larger and heavier payloads. Companies and governments are welcoming their innovations. But they fear the flip side. There is no viable competitor to keep the market healthy. For now, Blue Origin is best positioned to take that spot. In fact, New Glenn already has dozens of contracts worth billions of dollars lined up. So its launch would be good news for the market, and it would give SpaceX a run for its money. But after the launch scrub, following a morning of constant reassessments, the world's second richest man will have to wait a little longer to match his rival, the world's richest man.
When it comes to making headlines, Pakistan International Airlines, or PIA, never fails to reach for the skies, sometimes with planes and sometimes with pure chaos. Their latest ad campaign, it's a masterpiece on who on earth approved this. The PIA announced the resumption of flights to Europe with a tagline, "Paris, we're coming today." But it's the picture that has everyone buckling their seatbelts, because nothing says "Welcome back to Europe" like a plane hurtling towards the Eiffel Tower. Talk about aiming high and terrifyingly close. It's left the internet asking, is this a threat? Now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Tens of thousands go on strike in Belgium against a possible pensions reform. An Estonian slackline champion completes a world-first high-line walk between two Dubai towers, and dozens brave minus 50 degrees Celsius weather to run a marathon in Russia. Finally, we are taking you back in history. On this day in 1915, a 6.7 magnitude earthquake struck central Italy. 30,000 people were killed. The total damages were worth $60 million. Rome was also hit by the tremors. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Pensioenen van de mensen.
Onder de kop.
Alexander Mayeda.